Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Fantasy Bout Hour, the channel dedicated to bringing you fantasy matchups on a regular basis. If there's a particular matchup that you want me to cover, please leave it in the comment section, and I promise to honor your requests. Don't forget to subscribe and to hit the bell notification. I know it's been a while since I made my last video. You know how crazy life gets, but I'm going to try to at least put out 2 videos a week. So stay tuned for those. And the fight that I'll be bringing to you in this video comes by way of request. Actually, I got 2 requests for this particular fight, and it's coming from Tyrell Gaines and Henry Jones. I thank you for participating in the channel. The fight that they mentioned is Marvelous Marvin Hagler versus Roy Jones Jr. What an intriguing matchup. This is a common one that people talk about, so I'm picturing it taking place at 160. So here we go. We know how menacing Marvin Hagler was. We know how skillful he was. One of the best southpaws in the history of boxing, if not the best southpaw in the history of boxing, next to Sweet Pete Pernell Whitaker. We know he had power. We know that he was a warrior. He liked to go to war. And, just a tough fighter and just one of the best fighters in the history of boxing. Probably the best member of the Fabulous Four. And then we have Roy Jones Jr. Roy Jones Jr. had the best reflexes in the history of boxing as far as I'm concerned. Very quick fighter, very unorthodox fighter, naturally talented and gifted guy. Roy Jones Jr. just passed the eye test from the get-go. So Roy Jones Jr. was a phenomenon. So we have 2 guys who were the best of their eras. So of course, this is a common fantasy matchup. So as far as my thoughts on the fight, like I said, Marvelous Marvin Hagler was tough. But I personally feel that Roy Jones had more tools in the toolbox. That Roy Jones was more explosive. That Roy Jones was faster. And as we saw in the Leonard fight, first of all, that's opening up another can of worms. And I'll do a Leonard versus Hagler debate video. We'll be debating that decision until the end of time. But what I got from that fight is Marvin Hagler had trouble with fighters who moved around. He had trouble with fighters that he couldn't corner, that wouldn't stand there and trade with him. So movement could give him problems, and he got frustrated in the Leonard fight. And so I see the movement being a problem for Marvin Hagler. Now, Roy Jones Jr. can't afford to lay against the ropes and let Marvin Hagler pound on his body. That would be a bad strategy against one of the best fighters in the history of boxing. So Roy Jones would be smart not to find himself in that position or trapped in the corner or anything like that. Roy Jones Jr. would have to keep this fight in the center of the ring. And I believe that if Roy Jones Jr. kept this fight in the center of the ring, that he has the speed advantage. His reflexes will give him the advantage. And, Roy Jones Jr. throws punches from the craziest angles. So while the Marvelous one will be competitive in this one, I just feel that Roy Jones Jr. has more tools in the toolbox. So I'm looking at a Roy Jones Jr. majority decision in this fight. Please let me know what you think, and I'll see you on the next video.